Physical media, you can't beat it.
You cannot. And plenty of your films are amongst it. I can
Oh,
assure you.
good.
I got to say, like, I'm yet to come across any of your films that I haven't loved. So,
Oh, thanks.
congrats on this
Thank
one.
you.
It's a beauty.
Thank you.
I'm sort of start by prefacing that I know you've done a lot of media for this, and I've actually intentionally avoided as much of it as possible, simply so I can come at these questions as fresh as possible and with a curiosity factor. So I apologise if I ask you something you've answered a million times.
That's fine. That's fine. Don't worry.
I do know, however, that you were friends with Peter Grest long before his ordeal in Egypt.
Oh,
Um,
oh, I wasn't friends. I knew him. I
right.
knew our parents were friends. Our fathers are friends and
Mm-hmm.
colleagues.
Okay.
They're both architects and they're both Latvian,
Mm-hmm.
and both our families are Latvian. And I think I met Peter when I was about, I don't know, 12 or 10, and he was about, yeah, same age or a year younger. Because when the story broke, it was obviously big news amongst our families,
Mm.
and I was kind of obviously, on tenterhooks the whole time he was in prison.
That would have been very surreal. So, did you know then and there that it's maybe something that you'd love to tell his story later on, or was it not even in your mind to make a movie
Oh,
about it?
look, it had kind of because it was still playing out. You know what I mean? The whole thing hadn't really. It was active. It was live. So I wasn't really because there was no outcome.
Yeah.
It was all still playing out. So I didn't think about it then. And then maybe when he was finally released, maybe the idea did quickly shoot through my brain. I can't remember, but I was obviously maybe too busy on something else. And it was only until Carmel Travers, the producer, called me about 4 years ago
Mm.
and said, "Do you know anything about Peter Grester?" And I laughed and said, "I do actually know him."
Yeah.
And she said, "I'm doing a film about it." I said, "Look, sign me on. I don't even have to read the script. I'm on board." That was the sort of the kind of the turning point moment for me.
And was he already sort of involved as a consultant or anything at that point in time?
Very much so. Very much so. I mean, Carmel optioned his book,
Mm-hmm.
The First Casualty, which
Yep.
is being re-released now under the title of Correspondent, and she's an ex-journo herself, so she was very vested in the material. And the great thing was that what came with that was Peter's involvement, and Peter was very involved with the writing of the first draft with Peter Duncan,
Mm-hmm.
and remained involved in all the drafts. So we'd always vet the script with Peter. So having that access and his blessing was great.
Yeah, for sure. And was he beside you as well through production? Like,
Not really beside, I wouldn't say beside. He
mm-hmm.
was he was on call.
Yeah.
He was available, and he was, as I said, accessible and very open to discussing anything. I only think he came to set once
Mm-hmm.
for one
Okay.
day. But by that point, we grilled him. Even all the heads of department, we had a big lunch one day and we sat down and spent 6 hours just basically interrogating him about everything from the kind of toothbrush he used to the underpants he wore and all that kind of stuff. So we got our money's worth out of him.
Man, I mean, these guys are made of like tough stuff, but I can't imagine reliving the whole ordeal again, like through writing the book and then, having a film made and being a consultant on it. Did it have an emotional effect on it? Did he seem to be emotional when this stuff was, being fleshed out and recreated?
Yeah, I think he had a couple of moments I think where it was a little overwhelming. But he'd also Peter's a very very strong person
Yeah,
because he had to be to survive what he did, and he picked up a lot of amazing psychological tools
yeah.
during his time there, and I think that stood him well over the years. And he has written about it, and he has done. I think he has come to terms with it. So by the time we were making the film, he was fairly resilient.
Mm-hmm.
But I do remember the day I first showed him the film, that was quite confronting for him. And, I remember sitting next to him all throughout it going, oh my God, he hates it. You can't create all these kind of scenarios in your head. And then the film finished and he walked out. He said, sorry, excuse me. And I went, oh my God, oh my God, oh my God. And then he came back a few minutes later and said, I'm sorry, I just had to gather myself. And obviously, he was very emotional.
Mm.
And he said, you've done an amazing job.
Oh
And
man.
and he was very, yeah, and he realized as well he had to kind of do a sort of a mental calculation in his head, saying, no, this isn't me, this is a story about me.
Yeah.
But he said, cumulatively, you got it so right. So that was very, very gratifying to hear that.
100%. I imagine too for him, like even those flashbacks with Kate would have been really difficult. Um, that
Yeah,
whole
they
that
were.
that whole storyline was really well sort of woven through the film. Was
Thank
her
you.
was her story always going to be part of it?
Well, look, yeah, well, it became part of it
Mm,
because when I first got the first script was quite traditional. It wasn't with Peter in the jail, even though that was one part of the story, but it would cut to Australia and the family, and it cut to like
yeah.
the consulate in Egypt and in Canberra. I think there were all these different story strands going on, all these different islands of action and characters going on, and I just felt, look, I think the film is in Peter's story. I think all these other stories are a little, they're getting in the way,
Hmm.
and it just felt a little bit standard. And I felt we have an opportunity here to do something really cinematic and really striking, and making the audience feel what Peter feels. And I really wanted to make the audience see through Peter's eyes
Hmm.
and literally see and experience what he experienced, which was essentially the minute there was a knock on the door, it was just a constant labyrinth of the insides of prison vans, prison cells, corridors, courtrooms. That's what Peter saw.
Yeah.
So I thought, well, wow, if we did that, we'd be able to kind of make something really interesting. And so Kate's story really became something, therefore, that became very important because it allowed us a reprieve out of that world, so we could escape that world for a few moments and a few
Hmm.
beats. But because Peter was never really, because he never escaped, he wasn't rescued, he wasn't tortured,
Mm,
because there wasn't any of those classic kind of prison movie tropes to sort of lean back on
mm,
structurally. We realized because we didn't have a dramatic climax, we actually we came to the realization we've actually got an emotional climax,
yep.
which is Kate's death. And
Hmm.
then we reverse engineered from that, using Kate's death as the moment of him, discovering that she's died as our kind of our denouement, as our kind of climactic point. And that was how the film suddenly kind of came together, knowing that we would have this sort of ticking time bomb, that if we played it right, that would coincide with his release. We would be able to kind of create something very powerful for the audience to experience and give an insight into how Peter felt at that point in time.
Yeah, for sure. And it was a powerful moment. I remember the entire cinema I was in, in gasp in that moment. Just couldn't. We knew it was coming, but it's done so well. Um,
Thank you.
was there any pushback at all, like from the Egyptians? Like, did their consulate get in touch and object to it at all? Nothing like that.
No, no, we haven't heard anything yet. I mean, as the credits say at the end, Peter is still a convicted terrorist in Egypt, and Peter says, he's been saying in the Q&As, he's saying, this is what's great about this film is it gives me a chance. I mean, it gives me a chance to just give a big up yours to the Egyptian government
Yeah.
because they've done nothing but ruin so many people's lives, including Allah El Fatah, who's still in prison. The character
Yep.
who kind of saved Peter, gave
Hmm.
him the psychological tools that he needed to survive. So it's still, for us, it's and for Peter especially, the film is a real important clarion call and a reminder that this regime is still active and
Yep.
still suppressing and oppressing its
Yeah.
own people.
Incredible. It's fascinating that you and Peter sort of have a connection going back, but I think Peter Duncan and Richard Roxburgh also go way back. They, I believe, did Rake together. They've had a working relationship for a while, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah.
Did their well established sort of relationship make it lighter work for you as far as how Richard comes about adapt or acting out the words?
Well, it certainly helped. That kind of familiarity and that shorthand is great, but it's
Hmm.
still hard work, no matter
Yeah,
what.
yeah,
Even if I didn't, even if there wasn't that connection. Um, but Richard's a very, very smart, very generous, very empathetic human being,
hmm,
and he just made the whole job for me very pleasurable because I knew he was invested in it. I knew he was up for it. I had worked with him before in my previous film, so I knew what he was like, and he was an absolute delight to work with. And Peter Duncan and I had spent about 3 years developing the script, so there was a kind of a good sort of trust and familiarity amongst all of us.
yep,
So it was just, yeah, it was it was easy on one level, but hard on another because we physically had to make it work.
hmm,
And it was a tough shoot because Richard was in every scene. over the 6 weeks, and it was a grueling schedule. So he was running one in the morning, crying in the afternoon, and playing backgammon before lunch.
Mm. Um, I imagine as an actor for Richard, it makes it, I wouldn't say easier, but it helps to give a great performance when you've got an authentic looking or feeling environment around you. So I want to sort of ask you about the production design. I've got an old mate who used to be a war photojournalist. He's now a Hollywood journalist, but I used to watch his work vicariously through his website and his social media, and it was such a harrowing experience to watch, this kind of stuff unfold in real time. I think you've captured something really authentic with the Correspondent that I sort of related back to those images I used to watch. What things do you do to make the film as genuine and as authentic as possible, with environments and whatnot, when you're not there at the time? You've recreated it.
Well, you do your research. You go online and you look at anything and everything you can find. For example, about Egyptian prisons.
Mm-hmm.
And there are some Egyptian films that I watched. One, I can't remember the title of it now. Incredible film, all set inside a prison van at the time of Peter's arrest. That
Yeah.
was an amazing resource. And we also had all the news reports at the time, because it was just after the Arab Spring.
Mm-hmm.
There's a great documentary called The Square, which was about the square in Cairo, where all the activists and everyone would congregate, and every time there was a overthrowing of government, that's where everyone kind of amassed. So there was a lot of material, and you just kind of magpie it. You just sort of pick what you think is right,
Mm-hmm.
and then you combine that with the resources you've got here, and you create this kind of palette of colors and textures. And that's the fun part, really, of making these films, is that you always draw from reality, and try and reflect it somehow and put it together to kind of tell the story you've got on the page.
It must be gratifying then when Peter gives you that tick of approval. Yep, you've nailed it.
Yeah, well, we shot it all in Sydney.
Yeah,
We couldn't go to Cairo.
that's right. Phenomenal.
But I always knew the camera only needs to see what it needs to see. It doesn't need to see everything.
Mm-hmm.
We don't need. There's no drone shots of Cairo.
Yep.
It's literally what's through the bars of the cell,
Yep.
and how those walls look, and how the corridors look, and how the lighting feels.
Mm-hmm.
And that's what we do in movie making. That's, as I said, that's our palette. That's our job, is to paint with those colors and with those textures and with those lenses and with that light, to create accumulatively the sense that we're there.
For sure. The film has a really strong legal thriller aspect to it, for want of better phrase. How difficult is it balancing truth and integrity with entertainment value?
Well, it's sort of it's all stems down to the script. Peter Duncan wrote a really great script.
Yeah.
And that's the challenge. I think is the challenge is in the writing,
Mm-hmm.
and is filtering that and making it dramatic and making it still truthful, but making it compelling and making it also feel real. For me, the courtroom scenes were the most challenging, because courtroom dramas, as we know, are kind of a staple of television,
Mm-hmm.
and it was really important that when I did those sequences, that there was a sort of a verisimilitude to them, that they felt dramatic and cinematic, and that first person perspective, always seeing it through those grills, was kind of part of that. But even in the edit, we there was a lot more stuff shot in that courtroom. There were a lot more scenes that was set in there. But in the edit, we realized, we're really going to run out of favors very quickly if we keep staying in this courtroom. So the editor and I worked. That was the hardest part of the edit, was just getting that courtroom middle section of the film really chugging along. And we just then realized all we needed are the really main key points, the dramatic moments where there were big shifts in the court case, and get rid of the minutiae. So that was the trick. Once you've shot it, and once you've shot the script, the trick is then to kind of, in the edit,
Yep.
make it come alive and not making it feel suddenly like we're watching TV.
Yeah, I think the chaos of those courtroom scenes, and just like the primitive nature of it, having them behind bars all grouped together, and the judge being as corrupt as he was, like that, it just made it such a thrilling watch. And I was just constantly thinking, man, this is such an entertaining movie as well as being like informal. So yeah, well done on that. I don't have you for long, so I'm going to quickly pivot if I can. One thing I do love to ask everybody I talk to is, was there a film in your youth or childhood that put you on course to become a filmmaker? Is there one film that sort of lit the spark?
Jaws.
Yes, excellent. I'm glad you said that. It's one of my favorites of all time.
I'll never forget. It was I think it was September in '75. I was 11.
Yep.
My father took me to a midday session at the George Cinema in Brisbane.
Mm-hmm.
It was a packed cinema. It was electrifying. The atmosphere in that cinema was like, I'd never experienced anything like that in my life. It was so wonderful. I came out like literally humming and buzzing, going, what did I just watch? And everything about that film, everything about the way the camera moved, the colors, the characters, the entertainment of it, the suspense of it, the horror of it, I was like, wow. And then I started reading about this guy called Steven Spielberg, and I read that he's been making films since he was a kid, that his father got him a Super 8 camera. So I begged my father to get me a Super 8 camera, and then I just started this intense, passionate, obsessive love affair with cinema. I mean, then it was Jewel, and then it was everything that he'd made, Sugarland Express, and then realizing, oh my God, there's European cinema, there's not just American cinema, there's Australian cinema, and at that time, Australian cinema was really strong. So I felt like, this could be a potential career. This could be something I could do. And I was off and running.
Man, I'm glad you said that. There was a moment, first day in film school for me, because I went to film school, where we had sat in a circle and we had to all talk about who our favorite filmmakers are. And I was the only one that said somebody like Spielberg. I said Steven Spielberg, hands down. And I got laughed at, right? Because you had all these pretentious people saying Fellini and all this kind of stuff. And it was my teacher that jumped in and says, well, that's the only honest answer I've heard all day.
It's true.
It's a business. And if you want to aspire to something, aspire to that.
Well, Spielberg, no matter what, like he's fault him on whatever level you want. He's still man, I'm actually even more impressed with Jewel than I am with Jaws.
Yeah.
Jewel I still watch every year just to remind myself, like, this is the kind of film I'd love to make one day. Just shoot it in 13 days and put the camera where the story is, and just that film is a masterclass in filmmaking. He is a genius with the camera.
If you do something like that, I will be there. Day one, front row, mate. I would love that.
I'm working on it.
I'm going to end it with a compliment and just tell you that one of my favourite pieces of Australian television was The Principal. So thank you, sir. I absolutely adore that series. So that was amazing.
Thanks. Well, a lot of the cast are in that are in this. So I was able to work with Rahel Rahman again, and it was great.
So good.
Thank you.
Thanks for your time, mate. Love The Correspondent, and I hope it really does well.
Thanks, Glenn. Thanks so much. Thanks for the feedback.
We have spent most of our lives in some of the most dangerous places on the planet. But with you, there's nothing else. What are you running away from?
We're journalists. We're good at it.
Yesterday's massacres and trying to instigate a media blackout have infuriated the rest of the Egyptian people.
These protesters are making it very clear how willing they are to defy the government.
Peter Gresta, Al Jazeera.
Who is it? Mr. Peter? Yes. Who are you? Are you police? It's time to go. And? Hi. Tell them we have to stay together.
كلها لا حكومة فمتحفنا.
Peter Gresta.
And Peter Gresta.
Charged with aiding a terrorist group. You know what's going on here.
We're pawns in a political game.
Push to go. There must be some confusion. I'm just a journalist.
My lawyers told my family that you can be bought cheaply because you have no moral allegiances.
I need to know what you said in your statement.
They know where I live. They know I have a child. Just wanted to go home.
Hello, sir.
This whole world's bloody insane.
Dad, you're not helping.
Al Jazeera is a terrorist organization, and these are their agents.
Rami Muhammad wa Peter Griff. Killed Tahir Muhammad. 7 years.
The only way through this is to make a case to the world.
Now is the time for pressure.
I'm nervous as I write this. I've been caught in the middle of a multi-headed political struggle. So our arrest here is not a mistake.
Your letter was very good. There'll be repercussions.
Your voice is becoming an echo chamber in the West.
I can no longer pretend it'll go away by keeping quiet.
We will never give up.
As a journalist, this is my battle.